this term before?
No.
Okay, good. It's not a normal term. Semi sounds like half and audix sounds like hearing. Okay. Why would I put a picture of comics up?
Because they're probably in
This girl. This girl. All right, so basically, semiotics is the study of signs. It's how we interpret signs. But it's got a billion definitions because it really encompasses the entire psychology of signs. So we're going to break this down step by step. First thing you should associate semiotics with: signs. Study of signs, study of symbols, study of signification, as well as the various ways we communicate our interpretations of the signs. So there's very specific terminology, and we'll get into that a little bit. It's the application of language to what visually stimulates us and what it connotates within our brain. So how we are actually understanding these images and how we communicate our understanding of these images to one another. It also presents a vast variety of theories, including how signs present objects, ideas, states, situations, feelings, conditions outside of themselves. So I'm going to show you guys an example to help break this down a little bit from a crazy, just extensive definition to more layman's terms. So again, please don't write down every word and kill your hand. Semiotics equals signs, understanding signs, objects, ideas, states, situations, feelings, and conditions. Those are the important things. Okay? So, what does that actually mean? Within semiotics, anything used for human communication is defined as a sign. This could be very basic, like the signs we see here, but it could also be something as simple as facial expressions, gestures, music, Morse code, any way that we're communicating to each other and we take that and internalize it into an understanding is an example of semiotics. Somebody giving a sign and us receiving it. This is where the psychology starts to come into play a little bit more. It's derived from the Greek word semiotikos, which is observant of signs. And the reason it's so interesting is because it's this idea of internalizing or internal communication that we don't even realize that we know how to do. So if you saw this picture, what do we know that means? Yeah, a place to throw away your trash. If we see this picture, hospital. So again, these are just signs that we have come to recognize and come to give meaning to so that we can all understand them without actually having to verbally use our words or literally write them down. This is where it's going to get a little weird, but just hang with me. So, there is 3 concepts within a sign. You have the signifier, the signified, and the signal. So, the signifier itself is the image, sound, or marks on a paper. For our example, we have a picture of a heart. So that would be our mark on the paper is the actual drawing of the heart. Now the concept that we are trying to show through this heart is our signified. And the concept that hearts usually would represent love, romance, that sort of thing. If you saw a heart drawn on like a note somebody gave to you, you would assume they like me today. Cool. But we get the heart symbol from the actual heart within us. So that would be what we call the referent. So it's our referred sign. When we draw this, this is where it came from. That's where we get into denotation, connotation. So our actual human heart, when we draw it, denotes an image of a heart. It connotates the idea of love and romance. We'll do another example of this too. Let's see. Let's try an example of writing. So, writing is the actual physical thing, right? What could we do for like a denotation? A smiley face? How about like, what if I had like a quill pen? That's like the worst ink pen I've ever drawn. So if I did like a quill pen, would you guys assume I'm talking about like writing? Like your English teachers when they add those cute little graphics at the top of the paper, right? To be like, oh look, it's an English paper. And it's something like a quill pen or like Shakespeare, right? So that would be our connotation, or our denotation. And what is it connotating? Writing. Very good. So they all work together, and it's so hard to kind of grasp this in the beginning because it's something that we already internally kind of make sense of. We don't break it down in our head. We understand the difference between connotation and denoting something. So it's a little bit more difficult when you break it down like this. So why do you guys think that we're talking about semiotics today? Say it again. The book. Persepolis, right? So, remember Miss Stokes told you how difficult it was when she started to read The Dark Knight? She's a really fast reader, but she was having trouble reading that. That's because if you don't understand how to visually look at pictures, sometimes it can be really difficult. Persepolis breaks it down. Persepolis follows a very distinct path where a lot of the terms I'm going to cover aren't applied, but it's really important for you guys to understand when you use this for other graphic novels or just visualizations in general. So we're going to start with what are called gutters. This is how we fracture our comic up. So each comic is put into a specific panel, and the panels are put next to them. These panels represent time and space. So when we see one picture, we know that that's one instance of time. And when you go to the next picture, bless you, that's the next instance of time. So here it's very laid out for us very simply. He's walking, he stops and looks, he throws his hands up, he bends over, and then he does the super guy pose. These allow us to kind of put these pictures together in our head while they're still stagnant on the paper. But our mind makes sense of them. Our mind applies a sense of time to them. So, like I said, not all comics are that straightforward. Here we have something called Stumptown, and it is a little bit more difficult to read. And this is the way that the image is supposed to be. If you open up the book, you have this sideways panel, another sideways panel, and then it starts to rotate this way. And you guys might think that's really dumb, but there's a point to it. It's kind of like the way that the illustrator brings about a certain structure to their art. They're using it to actually kind of say something more about the comic itself, and we'll start to look into that now. So, first let's look at the largest panel. And it has what we call motion lines. These little lines coming out of here are motion lines. And they denote speed to the reader. So, now we know what they denote. What about the connotations? It may include the placement of Dex's car, which is the main character of Stumptown. And she's caught right now between chasing after the bad guy and fleeing from the police. So this big picture here is showing us what? Why is this one the biggest one? What could be the purpose of that? There's multiple things happening at one time. Very good. Why else might it be so big? Yes?
That's like the main point of the page, like, that they're racing or trying to chase one another, so understand that.
Very good. Did everybody hear that? That's the biggest picture because that's exactly what's going on at this moment. So in order to actually understand what's all the little nuances that are going on inside this comic, you have to set that picture in your head first. So, I'm going to show you guys another example of motion lines. See how he's running and the lines behind him show action? It's these little visual ways in which we clue in the reader of what is actually going on without having to use words and without actually having to use motion. So interestingly enough, our mind already takes this and just says, okay, he's running. Even though we're not actually seeing somebody run, we understand those lines mean running. And it's very interesting psychology to think about how we just interpret this ourselves. Then we have perspective, which we've talked about so much in this class. Perspective itself helps lend a lot of information to the reader. So we learned that the large picture is telling us that it's setting a place. But if we have to like tilt our head to it, then it's kind of making us become more involved with it. And then when we tilt our head back, it's almost like we are writing ourselves. We are getting back into the situation and trying to figure it out with the character. So the character's in this crazy high-speed chase and they want to disorient us too. So we have to turn ourselves to look at it. And by the time we start to fix ourselves up straight, the main character is starting to feel a little bit better about her situation. You also have this idea of the close-ups. So for example, we have a faraway picture here, and then we have a close-up of Dex's face. And remember I said facial gestures can be signifiers too? So what would her gesture tell us here? This one up there. Yes, Janae.
Like she's feeling more confident.
She's feeling more confident. And it's important to note because all of these other ones are just pictures of the cars from farther away. All of a sudden we have a close-up right on her face. So that's really telling us that she is in the zone right now. And we get reconnected with our character. The jumping around in the scenes helps us build some tension. So if we go away from her face for a minute and go back to the action, and then go back to her face and her, I guess her cohort's face, then we're pulled right back into the minute. So it kind of distances us, creates another sense of time, and then pulls us right back in. So, now we're gonna look at color and art. Color and art usually also say a lot about what the story is trying to tell you, as well as what the artist is trying to communicate to the reader. In this one, we have a lot of swampy kind of colors, a lot of murky, like greens and browns, rusty reds, darker oranges, faded yellows. So that really gives off this kind of murky setting. It's not quite pristine, it's not super clean. She's probably living, and it's called Stumptown, so she's probably living in some sort of rural neighborhood. I think somewhere maybe south or Midwest, where there's lots of trees, lots of dirt roads, things like that. So let's apply this now to Persepolis. What can the color and art style of Persepolis tell us? It's black and white. Yeah, you wanna go off of that?
Yeah, just make it kind of like, since it doesn't ever add color or take away color, when you have like fairness, these are spaces. But yeah, like they're in process, like they're not really.
no incoming of new color, there's no taking away of color, what else could being just black and white signify?
It's
Two extremes, absolutely. Yes.
Like it's not recent.
It's not recent, good. These are all very acceptable and definitely pertain to the story. I'd also say it's very poignant and specific in its design. There are no really tiny details in the pictures. Since it's all black and white, we just have those two colors to go off of, so everything is represented the way it is. You don't need to kind of over-focus on something. So now, let's look at what's called positive and negative space. And we again visited this a little bit in our initial perspective PowerPoint with the vase and everything. The idea of positive and negative space is just to define what we are seeing. So if Picasso is drawing a pot of flowers, the pot of flowers is the positive space. The negative space is all the space behind that pot of flowers in the painting. The negative space is really, really interesting because you can use it in a lot of unique ways. Here we have the Pittsburgh Zoo, and they have a tree, but in the negative space, we have the lion and the gorilla. This one is very common. The NBC peacock, which the negative space actually creates the peacock. This one I thought was really cool. It's for like a detective agency, and all they did was add in the 3 white bubbles so that you can tell the background of the detective. It's a very creative use of negative space, right? A lot of ads try to use negative space, especially more and more recently, and it's actually really good because it's something that people enjoy kind of picking out. It's like that final little surprise, you know? So let's look at some of the ways that Satrapi uses it in her book. What can you guys tell me about this negative space? What is it doing for us? Look at the way we have a dark door and we have a man over here. Yes?
emphasizes the person standing there.
It emphasizes the person standing in the middle, absolutely. What else can we learn from it? Yes?
Since in the clip when they're talking about like on the caption how they're separated, it shows like the isolation considering there's just the darkness in the middle.
Absolutely, yeah. It definitely emphasizes that isolation. It gives him a definite authorial power by placing him right in the middle and having nothing behind him. And then when the space does open up, it's only to portion out the students into 2 separate files. So it's a very powerful use of negative space to create an authority between the actual teacher and the students and their new roles. How about this one? How did we use negative space in this one? Yes?
Well, it kind of splits like the screen from one side to the other, so that you get like what you want and what you don't want.
Very good. It creates a mental idea of what is going on in the character's head. Did you have something to add, Jack?
No, that was more or less just like creates contrasts to highlight like the conflict that's going on with the character.
Very good, yes. Highlighting the conflict. And also clearly illustrating what it is she feels conflicted about, right? So we have this half of her is thinking about this. I don't want to give away the book if you guys haven't read it, but it's thinking about her obligations to culture. And then we have another facet of her that is thinking about her actual education and what she needs to do to improve on herself, what she wants from school. So, I think it's the last thing. You need to consider the actual text within the story. And in Persepolis, there's not as much use of this, but if you read basically any other graphic novel, go open any Avengers or Marvel comic, or, there's a billion of them. You can do DC, Dark Horse. Most of the action superhero comics use this a lot. The idea of how we are actually showing our words. And this is very prevalent in how we text today too. So like if we mean something, like if we really mean something, we capitalize all the words, right? Or if like you're kind of unsure about something, you do a lot of like the dots, right? So those are other examples of ways that we're using text to clearly, or more clearly, describe what we're trying to say. So ideas like underlining, italicizing, bolding, making a different font, something to call attention to what you're actually saying. So, I would like for us to work on a couple. And I had to take semiotics in college. And like I said, I had no idea what it was until like the third weekend. And I was like, oh, it's things I already know. It's just putting words to things I know. I get it now. These are two of the images that I actually had to analyze. So let's start with this one. It is from a graphic novel of, can you guys guess? Dracula. Yeah, somebody actually made just the graphic novel version of Dracula. So, what could this little tiny picture here tell us? It's a man looking out of a window. So we have there's something there. What about the fact that it's so small? What does that tell us? Yeah.
I don't think it's worth the like the fact that it's a small bit indicate like how compared to the speed of the sky, it's very little.
Very good. That's absolutely correct. So did you guys hear? Compared to this crazy thing outside, he's very small and powerless. Let's talk about this big crazy thing. What does it mean? Let's start with first how big the picture is. We know that that means he's big and scary. What else can show us how big and scary he is?
Size comparison of the.
What about how they've drawn him? Yeah.
He like reaching from one frame into the other.
Yeah, he's even reaching out of his frame to like come and get the character. And what about his hands? They're creepy and they got long nails. He doesn't look like a normal human. So even just the way he looks is a signal of how we're supposed to interpret this character. He's bad. He's not a good guy. So how about this one? It's a comic about Kurt Cobain. What does the fact that we have this big magazine cover that's like staring us right in the face, the first thing that we look at, what does that tell us? What is it?
It's important.
It's important. What is it doing for us? What do our big pictures usually do? Very good. And the fact that this is specifically a magazine cover, it's telling us who this person is, what time about this is happening, and it says like the 90s up there, and that this is what we're focusing on, right? Just like that big car picture, this is our main setting. This is who we're going to be looking into. Then you have Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love kind of back to back. What about their body language? What is their body language telling us? For this one right here. Yes?
Like they have a lack of communication.
They have a lack of communication. And this is the 90s, so the fact that they're on like phones at the same time is like a really big deal. Because either they have two landlines, or they both have cell phones, or one of them has a cell phone, and all of this is like crazy. So do they seem super into each other? Yeah, they're really busy. They have other things to do. And then you have a big old picture of the house. So what can we kind of learn from that? What do we think is going on? Yes?
Maybe there's like a shift in the setting or like what they want you to focus on.
Shift in the setting of what they want us to focus on. So what might they be doing now? Yes?
Well, it looks like in the first two they kind of establish the background information and then they're like transferring so much what's actually going on.
Very good. So we're learning about our characters, and now we're in a completely different setting with the characters. They happen to be buying a house here. But the pictures that show it look like they get smaller and smaller. So what happens to the details in those pictures? Smaller, right? They're like almost not there. So it's more of just an idea of what is going on rather than us seeing what is actually happening. So you guys get how this is drawing an importance to one thing and kind of setting a mood? So, we're going to get to our presentations now, but I just wanted to kind of give you a brief overview of what semiotics is. Hopefully it was helpful. Please read Persepolis because it's amazing. And if you guys are into graphic novels at all, please talk to me because I love graphic novels. There's so many suggestions. I have a lot I could lend out. I mean, it's just good stuff. So, thank you for the propaganda stuff. And let's get our presentations going.